We are good to go.
Thanks very much and welcome along everybody to hopefully our last Zoom DASC meeting. Getting back face to face shortly, hopefully. Full attendance. Thanks for joining us, Vlad. Confirmation of the minutes for the 5th of May 2020. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor De Williams and Councillor Nichols, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? No, I shall put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand and carry by voice.
Aye.
Thank you. Passed unanimously. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Having viewed the agenda today, I guess we all have, but anyone wish to declare a pecuniary interest? No hands, Robert, so we'll take that as a no. In considering the following land use planning matters, the Development Assessment Special Committee intends to act as planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. 4.1 is the development application for 11 Arthur Street, Pembroke Park. A mover and seconder, please.
So moved.
Ladd and Councillor De Grassi, thank you. And with that, I'll invite questions from the floor. If you just raise your hand, Robert will unmute you to discuss with whoever needs to be spoken to. Nathan, thank you.
Just give me a second. I'm just trying to find a way on. And now I'm trying to find. Right.
Okay. It's got listed in here time limits referring to sport to finish at 10 o'clock. Does that also include for the function rooms, or are the function rooms a separate time?
Through the chair, no, that does include the function rooms, so all the facilities to finish at 10 o'clock at this stage. There was some discussion about whether that should be a different arrangement, and at this stage it's unclear whether council as applicant, as opposed to as planning authority, has an interest in leasing out those spaces to be used for other purposes. There certainly is the opportunity, obviously, to request for those, for an extension to that time limit to be brought forward as a separate application. But at this stage, it was felt that the main purpose of the stadium was for sports activities. And with the function, there's a small function room there, which is it's not a massive space, so it would probably be suitable to support one of the sporting clubs that are going to be operating from there, but not necessarily to have other external activities held there.
Okay, yeah, so they could apply for an exemption then if they did want to have a later night.
Yeah, there are exemptions under the planning scheme for occasional uses, which, you know, if you just had a one-off sort of scenario. And the other option is that if it was to be council's applicant's position that they wish to actually use that space, including the whole stadium, for other activities, then they could put an application in separately to extend the time.
Thank you. It also has listed in the introduction that it provides for 2 netball courts. I just want to make sure that there is a basketball court in there which would be used for competition. It does mention further down that it does have a basketball court, but just in the introduction it doesn't.
Yeah. No, the space is interchangeable in that regard.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Mine's just around the wording. So where we've mentioned basketball and soccer and potential other uses of it, I'd just like to do away with that word ancillary. I don't want to see this as predominantly a netball purpose-built facility for netball and not for any other sports given the same recognition. So it's more around the wording of it for the planning permit. I just don't want to see it as a glorified netball court, and the others may use it, but netball gets priority on it. I'd like to see that be fair and equitable for all potential users of this purpose-built facility.
Can I, through the chair, clarify what? So with what element of the recommendation?
So it'll be, I think, in council's permit parts. I think we've put somewhere here around the word auxiliary. Where do we have it? Uses
What
here.
page you on?
I'm just trying to find it here where I saw it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Just got to scroll back through it. But it was.
It's not in the recommendation, so is it, Jeffrey?
I'm just having a bit of a look in there. It might be just permit, doesn't it? Sorry, it's in our introduction to it. So no, not in the recommendations, but yeah, just in our introduction that council have actually written. So I just wouldn't like it to get out that it's a purpose-built netball facility and others may use it.
I've had that discussion with Russell, Fox and Anthony and picked up on limited language, and it's just going to be referred to now as a multi-sport stadium.
Yep, thank you.
Through the chair, the application was advertised as a sports stadium with associated car parking.
Yeah.
So it has approval for any number of sports.
Yeah, it's just the way it reads. And we've advertised it, and it just keeps referring to netball. There's no mention of other sports all the time, so I just want to make sure that everyone's included. You know, like, yeah, I know from a legal standpoint we're using the right words. I just want to make sure that the public understands it's a multi-purpose.
Yeah, through the chair, I understand where Councillor Jackson's coming from, but it's in terms of what the decision ultimately may be of council as planning authority, then what's in the permit, and obviously what is in the plans. It's immaterial, really.
Should just add to that too, that a lot of the conversation during the design was some of the areas, the function room and the size of the entry lobby allow for both those areas, including the general meeting room, to be of a general community nature as well as not just sports. Those facilities
That's right.
for anybody to use. So that was a big part of the discussion when we was working through the design.
Has the function room actually changed size now, or has it always been that particular one at that 157 now?
It's pretty well the same. It had some minor changes because they had some of the doors to the services and one of the individual toilets there in the end opening up into it. So a corridor was put so that was a bit more tactful, and it was more along the lines of the building. So it's always been about that size, give or take a few metres. It was a little bit angled to start with, but the cost of doing the glass and everything like that for viewing was over the top, so it was simplified to minimise cost with the build. Councillor Reid.
Sorry. It won't let me unmute.
There we go.
Sorry.
My question really is what you were saying, Kerry, more about the background to this rather than the actual development application in terms of which stakeholders have had input into the plan to get to this stage.
Fair few. Robert might be able to add. Certainly soccer, basketball, both with local expertise, and also on a Basketball Tasmania, and netball on obviously Marsha being the main person, but also Phil Stoneman, who's the CEO of Southern Netball Association, and also the state body as well. There was a bit of input from people associated very early in the piece from PCYC. Some of that was through the government, and Sport and Rec, I think, were the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, Robert.
Yeah, plus through Mayor, the South East United plus Football Federation TAS at the CEO level, and Glenn McNeil, whose role escapes me at the moment, but he's just under the CEO, so they were consulted with. I've lost track of time now. It was a while ago. It would have been when the around about when the election was on, just around that time.
Any other questions at all? Councillor Nichols.
Just the fact that there aren't any basketball lines on the plan, is that going to be rectified?
Yeah, through me, it's part of the detailed design going for the tender.
Yeah. From a through the chair, from a planning perspective, that that doesn't have an influence on the permit that we're issuing.
Okay, thank you.
There were some discussions on the fact that it does get a lot of lines on when you're having the two courts set up for basketball, the same two courts are set up for netball, and then you have a third main court running the opposite direction for major netball or basketball games, causes other lines there, but most other stadium complexes work on that very same principle, and it doesn't seem to be a hassle really. And we can't afford to have a specialised one way or the other. It has to be to suit as many sports as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Not overly related to DASC, but I noticed we've got the 3.1s off the and 3 metres off the edge of the courts. And I notice when you have the show court through the middle, there's some discussion around retractable seating for the show court. Is that now gone due to cost, or is that still in there? Or
Yes, it is on the Montague Street side. You have extractable seating that comes out 8 or 10 metres. It comes out a fair way.
On one side or both?
One side, on the Montague Street side.
Yeah.
So yes, that's still being costed at the moment. Anthony's talking to 2 or 3 different companies to find out what's the best, most low maintenance and best value for cost at the moment. The architectural company in Victoria has been involved with a fair few of these sorts of jobs, so has some very sensible recommendations, and Anthony's enjoyed sort of having that input.
Thank you.
Councillor Trenius, Carl.
Right.
Right to go.
Thank you. Just read the footpath to the circle, or from the circle to Montague Street, which is reliant on the Vulnerable Road Users Grant. If we aren't successful, are we then committed to construct that footpath within the next 2 years? Is that along with the Curvin Channel on the other side?
Yeah, I might through you, Mayor. The road asset management plan was forecasting for next financial year, so 2021, that we should be resealing that section of Montague Street from Arthur up to, I think, what's that little court called? Is it Charlotte Court?
Charlotte.
And we were subject to, if this thing gets approved, we were going to put that off at least another year to enable construction traffic to get up and down and do whatever damage they want to do to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we were very cognizant that whenever that work gets done, VRU or no VRU, we really need to factor in extending that footpath and curb line on the southern side of Montague to, as you say, from the Circle or Frederick Street to Arthur Street. So that's, as far as we're concerned, it's required regardless.
Mm.
That also forms a bit of a link with the bottom end of the walking tracks that will come out near the new subdivision at Marina Park as well. So
yeah,
fairly essential to get those links going.
It's a priority.
Yeah.
It's a priority.
Yeah.
Okay. Just one more thing. Tas Waters' reply, I didn't see anything in the report were there any issues re Tas Water?
Just bear with me for a moment.
Yeah. Carmel, you might remember that when we put the RV park in there, they wanted to charge us for, I think it was 6 or 8 lots there, because they reckoned that was the size of the house.
Yeah.
And we took that to task, and I think we won that one, and I was interested to see if they were going to do the same thing with the stadium.
Yes, I was interested to see the report, but it wasn't from Tas Water, but it wasn't included.
I think they work now more off the size of the connection, whether it's 20, 25 or 32 mil.
Through the chair, yeah, there was a Tas Water referral. So we need to be including that condition, which I could email this to you, Rob. Do you want to share the screen?
I could try.
How's that going to go for our technology?
Well, what does I mean, we've got through the chair condition in there for Tas Water referencing their.
We've just got the span referenced.
Yeah. So what are the actual details of it, Caroline?
Suitably sized water supply with metered connection and sewage system. Any removal, supply and installation of water meters, and the removal or redundant of installation new modified, so fairly standard conditions. There were 3 trade waste conditions in relation to council must contain Tas Water's consent to discharge trade waste from Tas Water. Developer must install appropriately sized and suitably treated pre-treatment devices prior to gaining consent to discharge. Developer property owner must comply with all Tas Water conditions prescribed in the trade waste consent. There are development assessment fees, which are fairly standard. So there doesn't appear to be anything of great interest.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Thank you.
Anything else at all to discuss? Councillor Reynolds?
Thanks, Kerry. Just from a traffic management point of view, should we be looking at adding speed humps and a gate, or will we wait until it's finished and assess and see how the traffic behaviour is once it's completed?
Through the mayor, in terms of the new access road, I'd be inclined to get it finished and see how they behave, and if it turns out to be a quarter-mile drag strip, we'll do something about it. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily see we need to condition it now or worry about it at this point. I guess it depends on how well they go at the game, if they're happy or not when they leave.
It's good. It's a good point, though.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Sorry, hang on.
Just on the same thing with traffic. So, like, I know we've got to upgrade Montague Street. We're obviously putting in a new laneway for access to this. We've got, it looks like on the drawing, car parking for 200 cars. Do we need to have a traffic impact assessment for Montague Street for that amount of people going in and out during the day if that car park's full?
Shall I respond to that?
Yes, I was sorry. I'll make sure I muted you. Sorry, Caroline.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, there is car parking for that number of vehicles. Whether they're all going to be in use at the one time, probably on the weekends there'll be periods of time where there'll be multiple facilities, including outdoor facilities, that will be in use. And you could imagine that for the soccer fields, for example, you would park in that area because it'll be closer than the other car park. A full traffic impact assessment hasn't been provided. However, I understand that Jacobs are undertaking some work for council in relation to servicing and design issues. And so I would expect that they will be looking into some of these traffic impact requirements as well. Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, the final configuration of the car park hasn't been resolved. So that it provided an indicative 200 spaces, but the detail hasn't been done because what is a known, assuming that proves it, is obviously the stadium, but what is unknown is future development, which is all grant dependent. In other words, fields or a relocated tennis facility, both of those, I should say, unless someone else finances them. And at that point, we would know whether, you know, if the car park needs to be extended or not. And this stage will be by the engineers will be, well, a bit of a analysis of, well, the this now and potentially include will generate X number of spaces, but work out the cost of making it larger or not, as opposed to later if other available. So there's the use, or the amount of parking required through the forecast use, and then there's the potential parking required get built later. So we're just going to work out the exact number, configuration, and how much weight, because obviously the grant funding, the entire cost of the facility, including the stadium and and access and parking.
So a couple more questions then in relation to that, if I may. Then, if we approve this tonight, we've approved for 200 car parks, or as per the drawing that we've been given. And then the other thing, are we on a time frame against this? Because I'm surprised we haven't workshopped it. It seems fairly rushed, and there's still bits and pieces being added to it. And then it's pretty fluid at the moment. It's not set in stone. So I'm just wondering, are we still rushing, or are we on a time frame? I don't quite get how come it's happening so quickly now.
Through the chair, well, it's been a project we've had for quite a while. It's been part of the master plan for quite a while, and the funding became a reality sort of mid last year. So, and that funding has requirements for commencement dates and completion dates. So that is absolutely time driven in that sense. But in terms of the concept of what has been on the books, if you like, for a number of years now, it hasn't really fundamentally changed. So it's the access to the parking. The only real thing we're not sure about is just, I guess, we, as an absolute minimum, would provide the required parking for the stadium and the existing uses that are there. It comes down to how much additional parking we may provide now or may not for uses that haven't yet been approved nor funded. So that'll determine that. Yeah, I'm referring to extra soccer facilities or a new tennis facility.
Yeah. So as per page 20, though, if we approve this tonight, we're approving that as per 6.61, the 200 car parking spaces and 10 motorcycle spaces.
Mm-hmm. And if I can say through the chair, they actually complied with the scheme requirements, which also tends to be a trigger point as to whether you require a full TIA or not. If it does comply with the numerical requirements under the scheme, then the approach is generally that you don't request a TIA. A TIA is usually required when you have to demonstrate why it's acceptable against the performance criteria.
Yeah.
Councillor Reid.
Just thank you. Further to that same point on parking and access on page 20 is the comment that there's no requirement for bicycle parking. Similarly, it's not required, but would it be desirable? And is it simply that it's not required, that it isn't reflected in this? Was it considered, I guess is what I'm asking, as a feature?
There's a mention about that elsewhere.
Um,
I'm referring to page 20 where
20.
discussed under parking and access. the reference is there's no requirement for bicycle parking and the proposed layout is considered to meet the requirements.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I would have thought you'd have needed motorbike parking. Well,
No
anyway.
motorbike you do. It just says there's no requirement for bicycle parking, but it would be part of what Anthony would end up having there.
Ah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I guess,
So,
yeah.
Through the chair, under the planning scheme, it doesn't specify a requirement for bicycle parking, and I don't disagree with you that that's an unusual circumstance, because other things under the planning scheme do require bicycle parking. For example, a veterinary centre.
Right.
And you would think that if you're going to play netball, you're probably more likely to ride your bike than you are to carry your dog to the vet. Setting that aside, yeah, it's not specified as a requirement under the scheme, but it may be that council as landowner may choose to provide that in due course.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
That's good.
No worries. If there's no other questions, then
Ah.
I'll put the motion for acceptance of this development. All those in favour, please raise your hand and carry by voice.
Aye. Aye.
Passed unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. And any, John, if you've got any comments, you've been very quiet today.
Well, Caroline's